This is Thems Fightin Herds. Don't be fooled by the goofy looking four-legged combatants. This fan project turned fighting game masterpiece can and will make you rethink what fighting games can be. Less sugar, spice, and everything nice, and more like a little luck, hard work, and a pinch of innovation, Main 6 created the perfect fighting herds. Or did they? Well, it's true, I won't beat around the bush here. I can already tell you I love this game to death. But that's not to say that there is not a couple of problems here. This video will serve as both an attempt to help the game reach the masses I think it deserves, and to direct some feedback, perhaps my personal wish lists as well, to the game developers. I know this isn't related to the game itself, but I do think it's worth noting that developers are keeping a close eye on their growing community. Join the official Discord and you'll see exactly what I mean. Gold star for that, by the way. Well, with all of that out of the way, let's get into the real meat and potatoes of this game.
Stop showing off and get down to business. Fine, we fight. Just don't touch me.
I do not agree to these terms.
Round one. Fight.
Let's start with the roster. The roster is about as numerous as Paprika's brain cells, but it's also as playful as her heart. Much like the characters in it, the roster may not necessarily stand tall with just 6 playable characters, but it most certainly stands wide, as in a wide variety of playstyles. You can choose from the lovable Paprika, whose never-ending desire to spread love and affection ended up ironically spreading nothing but pure misery. The hearty Arizona, taking life by the horns. The peace-loving Palm, who constantly wishes she could avoid all this senseless fighting. The practitioner of dark arts Oleander, who aims to use her dark magic for a bright cause. The self-absorbed Velvet, letting you know that she's better than you. And finally, the oriental stereotype Tianho, whom, I'll be honest, I'm more interested gameplay-wise as opposed to story-wise, so not much to say there. All 6 of these bring something unique to the table. Oleander can keep you out with her huge effective range and tools that make it easier to win from a distance. She can also summon her demonic companion, Fred. Paprika can teleport for some reason and is able to run backwards. Her whole shtick is being weird, I guess. She also exclusively speaks in hugs and kisses. And seizures.
If you have half a brain, you will surrender now.
Yeah, I'm thinking plan A's off the table.
Round one. Fight.
Arizona can move fast and keep you in pounding distance as she tramples over you over and over again with strong, grounded offense. Meanwhile, Tianho is all about getting the high ground and attacking relentlessly from the sky. It's over, Anakin. I won't go into too much detail here, as that would take all day, but trust me, the roster covers a lot of ground with just a few characters. I personally want to see a grappler next, but who knows. Main 6, if you're listening, can we please get a bear grappler, and for the love of God, make him cuddly. Yes, I do mean him, and I want a big fuzzy bear in my life, and I am not ashamed to admit it. I understand predators are kind of the bad guys, but hey, not all predators, right? More on that in the story section though. For now, I'm going to say that I'm personally always a sucker for a member of the bad guy team fighting for the good guys. In my eyes, it always opens up an interesting story avenue to be explored. Okay, so now that we know the characters, we can delve more into how they play. I'm very happy to report that Thems Fightin Herds is one of the most fun games I've played in the genre. It's very easy to pick up and play, but it's complex and offers a lot of ways to play when mastered. It takes aspects from other games and further expands on them. The infinite combo prevention system is a great example of this. Every modern fighting game does its best to disallow infinite combos, however, almost every game does this in a different way. Arc System games tend to use their hit stun decay, Netherrealm games tend to use a gravity system that causes each subsequent hit to make the enemy heavier. Needless to say, there are many more unique systems across many games, but that's besides the point here. What you should know is that Thems Fightin Herds takes a page from Netherrealm and completely rewrites it. And I mean completely. Like in the Netherrealm titles, this game chooses to affect the gravity with each successful hit. The more you hit them, the faster they will fall. Pretty simple, no? Well, that's where the similarity to Netherrealm ends, and you're thrown into the deep end, reminding you that this is not just a fancy amalgam of fighting games. Under each player's health bar is a juggle decay bar, JD for short. I won't go into everything it does, because this isn't a tutorial, but just know that this bar is really important to both how you structure your combos and how you structure your offense after them. JD both keeps your combos from getting unfair and keeps the pressure in check. Long story short, when you get a hit in, you're faced with two choices. Well, there's more than two, but let's keep it simple for now. Cut the combo short and keep the advantageous situation, or hit them with everything you've got but lose some of that juicy post-knockdown pressure. Once the JD bar fills up entirely, you will lose a lot of options. Moves that used to restand, stun, cause a hard knockdown, or even just keep your opponent standing can no longer do that. Each hit after JD fills up will cause the enemy to fall down no matter what. In short, this means that if you want to put your opponent in tricky situations after the combo, you're gonna have to keep a close eye on your JD meter. Certain moves add, and certain moves subtract from the meter, so recognizing what's more beneficial in the moment and acting in accordance is key. Apart from that, the game uses a magic system unique to each character to vary up the fairly universal abilities of the roster. The offensive and defensive abilities available to everyone seem fair and enjoyable. The other stuff is exactly what you'd come to expect from a fighting game though. Just know that this game does everything you'd want, and then some. The offline modes are pretty standard. Nothing too special here, at least not apart from the story, which will get its own section at the end, as it's not yet finished. There are only local versus, story, and arcade modes available as of right now, but the developers have mentioned that they are looking into some of the modes the players have expressed a desire for. My personal request is to be able to access story-specific battles individually. I'll explain more in the story section, but for now, I would also like a way to maybe make our own obstacle courses of enemies. I don't know how reasonable these desires are, but that would really go a long way. The online is often what makes or breaks a game these days. Or at least, people think it is. Having good netcode is key to generating a loyal player base. That said, I think Thems Fightin Herds gets an A++ in that regard. It uses GGPO rollback netcode, so you know it won't lag behind some of the greatest netcodes on the market. That said, on this very rare occasion, I actually don't want to focus on the netcode too much. I think the more important thing to note here, however, is the online-specific game modes. Let it be known that I normally dislike online lobby systems. They all too often come at the expense of good matchmaking. They really do come across as just band-aids to the larger problem of, we don't know how to program reliable matchmaking. That said, Thems Fightin Herds said no to that idea. They developed a fun lobby system which has its own game modes and activities. The lobby is cute, well-designed, and dynamic. Every so often, a chest will spawn and you'll be able to loot it for some salt.
Wait a minute!
You didn't think it was gonna be that easy, did you? Every time you try to claim a chest, a player can try to contest it. This forces you to either give up on the chest or duke it out with the challenger. It's like watching National Geographic, except the animals aren't fighting each other for the right to reproduce, but rather they're fighting for the right to produce. And what I mean by that is salt. Salt being the in-game currency that can be used to purchase all sorts of fun cosmetics, from our favorite deer Cashmere. Wow, this game really is keeping with the theme of animal behavior, even when they're not trying, huh? But wait, that's not all. What if you're just a beginner player and can't really fight your way to salt? Well, fret not. Unlike National Geographic, however, This game isn't particularly fond of recording banged up losers walk away empty-handed. The salt in their tears feeding the opponents. No, no, no. If you don't want to fight for it, you could always mine for it. Enter the salt mines. The PvE and eventually PvEVP way to earn salt. This game mode allows you to mine salt mostly uninterrupted for a little bit. Other players will join you and you will have to fend off predators as you collect salt and spend it on various items. In the final stage, the player who collects the most salt will become a predator, turning into a bear boss monster and hunting down other players. It's a fun little event that benefits off the player count. Do you have what it takes to survive and thrive in the mines? Well, who knows, but don't worry, there is one more handy little feature in the online lobbies. That feature is voice chat. You can press a button and talk with the whole lobby if you so choose. Whether you're typing or talking, communication is as easy as it gets here. So go on, make some friends. They may be called assault mines, but the folk in them are surprisingly friendly, so give it a whirl. All that said, if you're still not sold on the lobby system, you might rejoice when I tell you matchmaking is still there and working as intended. Not only is it working as intended, but you can also access it from the training room or the pixel lobby. Hell, you can even enter training while in the pixel lobby while searching for a match in matchmaking. Talk about options. Speaking of training, as you might come to expect from a game that's built on the Z engine, the training room spoils you for choice. I'll go over some of the neat little tricks that you can do while in there. You can enable hitboxes, hurt boxes, and all other kinds of boxes at the press of a button. Enable or disable the background as well as blur it out if you so choose. Show basic or extended attack information. Record the dummy to do things. Slow down the game to practice in slow-mo. Learn pre-recorded viable combo routes, record custom combo routes, watch a computer execute said combo route, show/hide hit stun bars, alter the behavior of the AI-controlled dummy, add a human-controlled dummy, and so much more. Needless to say, the training room is well outfitted with all the basic necessities. While the recording function is currently a little bit wonky, I am informed that that is indeed a bug. So let's hope that this gets fixed very quickly and we can go back to praising all the options. Now all of that is well and good, but the game doesn't stop there. It doesn't just give you a training room and call it quits. No. If you want to learn, you have way more available. On top of a good training room, you also have a very serviceable tutorial mode. While the mode doesn't necessarily go to such depths like Under Night or even Mortal Kombat 11, it does get the job done. It introduces all the core concepts of the game and it does so well. What makes the tutorial great though is the pacing. This game does this one tiny little thing that really entertains me. The tutorial actually adapts to the player to a degree. Most games will tell you about something and then show you how to do it, but Thems Fightin Herds doesn't necessarily play by the rules. It'll smack you first and then tell you what happened. For example, you get told the character will block automatically as long as you hold back. To demonstrate this, you are tasked with blocking a simple string. After that, Oleander asks you to do it again and suddenly, BAM! You get hit by low. The game will often do things like these to keep you on your toes. It lets you know that this is a safe space, but not entirely a safe space. If you let your guard down, you might just find yourself getting hit. By doing things this way, the developers managed to keep my attention for far longer than other, maybe more expansive tutorials have. I find myself enjoying this tutorial way more. I find that it's a better learning experience than just giving you a textbook to read through. A lot of games just give you a bunch of text, simple explanations, and then you're supposed to just go through all of that. And finally, there is one more learning resource, but I'll keep it hidden for now. Before I tackle the final one, I want to talk about the visual and audio design, as I find it critical to tying everything together. Over the course of the years, I've tried to get many of friends into fighting games. Sometimes I even forget that I was a complete casual newbie once. I remember what got me to start learning these games for real is seeing high-level tournament play one day. Let me explain. I played fighting games before, but I was always just mashing buttons, so I found the gameplay to be clunky and unresponsive. I'd usually find one or two good attacks with the character and then just play around them. Pretty much single hits, no combos. Now, I imagine this is how most people start, but what got me really into the genre is seeing professional players string these attacks together, and suddenly these short and stubby and unresponsive buttons turn into a beautiful flurry of coordinated attacks. Some might say that I got drawn in by the gameplay, but in reality, it was the design that roped me in. Something clicked, and I saw these moves were designed to flow together. I'm not gonna lie, I immediately went in and tried it myself. So how is this relevant, you ask? Well, it just is. It is because I fully expect this game to be the first point of contact with the genre for many folk, and I also fully expect it to be the game that makes them feel that same way. Firstly, the game's aesthetic. Let's be honest here, characters created by Lauren Foss are going to draw in many fans of her work. That is a given. Not only that, but the game also animates beautifully and feels colorful and full of life. Oh, and if you're still not sold, look up the soundtrack. I'm not going to lie, the soundtrack kept bringing me back in. While with the visual design, what you see is pretty much what you get, the audio design is a bit different. You like Lauren's designs? You like the style around them? Good! Because if you don't like them, then I'm sad to say there isn't much other than quirky references to sway you left. The audio design, however, the sound effects are all great. I love the clicking noise made when sliding through menu options, and the hit/block sounds are all very distinct. I won't go over each individual sound effect, but just know that I like them all. The real star of the show, though, is background music. The main menu theme is amazing, and it only gets more interesting from there. Main 6 went out of their way to create a dynamic sound system. Basically, rather than settling for character themes, the developers created character audio profiles. This profile is then applied to everything involving the character, from the character select theme to the game stage themes. But that's not all. The music will also play an audio tug-of-war in the matches depending on who has the life lead. I'll be honest, I don't fully understand what triggers all of the music shifts, but the themes will adapt on the fly depending on what characters are on the screen. That's pretty cool, right? As for the quality of the music itself, I think it's all really stellar, but I'll let you judge for yourself. It gets a gold star from me though. Finally, there's one more thing to talk about. So, do you remember the time I said I'd keep the final learning tool a secret? Well, the jig is up. It was the story mode all along. The story mode is by far the most unique thing about this game. Most fighting games just write a story that pits the characters up against each other with maybe 1 or 2 NPC characters to fight as well. The gameplay itself is pretty much the same as the one you'd find in the arcade mode or the versus mode. This, however, is not the case for Thems Fightin Herds. The game can proudly say that they've created an alternate game mode. It's basically an amalgam of the pixel lobby system, plus the fighting system, plus some platforming. The story mode features 3 distinct ways to play so far. You start the story with the pixel lobby type gameplay, but it changes as you go. You take control of a pixelated avatar and explore the world, all the while solving puzzles and talking to the folk that inhabit the world of Fauna. Very quickly you're introduced to the platforming type of gameplay. There isn't a whole new way to play introduced in this part, but it is pretty unique. You pretty much move the same way you would if you were in a fight, however, these sections were made to familiarize you with your movement options and how they work for different situations. Rather than just pressing a button to jump over a hurdle, the game instead transitions you from the pixel gameplay to an obstacle course you have to clear. When you emerge, you will be loaded onto the other side of the obstacle. Simple, no? It makes training fun, and this is something that's sorely needed in the genre. The skills you learn here are easily applied to the main fighting mode, and that's not all. The story mode is filled with things that low-key make you train for fighting scenarios. Things like the enemy design, for example. This leads quite nicely into the third way to play. Enemy encounters are handled in a traditional 2D fighting game style. By all accounts, it's the same as the gameplay you would feel in the arcade mode, however, the enemies that you fight are not. Rather than fighting the playable characters for no reason, the majority of the battles focus on the main antagonistic force behind the story, the Predators. You see, a long time ago, the Predators were sealed away by the herds that occupy the world of Fauna. Before they were sealed away though, they vowed they would come back, and when they do, they would be hungry. Our 6 heroes are the champions of their respective tribes, and as such they have been selected to put a stop to the influx of predators that started terrorizing the herds. I'll be honest, I love fighting the predators. Each of them has been designed to teach you a certain lesson that will come in handy when fighting real people. The first predator you fight is a wolf, and you will see a lot of this enemy type throughout the game. The wolves will attack with only 3 attacks, and their movement is rather telegraphed. The main attack the wolves will use is a jumping attack. If you've played through the tutorial, you'll be familiar with the concept of anti-airing. Each character has an attack designed to beat aerial attacks. This is called an anti-air. The game never tells you this, but you're supposed to wait for the wolf to jump and then hit him out of the air with your anti-air. But even the most basic of enemies isn't that basic. The wolf is also equipped with low attacks and a grab. This way, if you try to block the wolf, it also teaches you the most basic way to block the opponent. Blocking low will leave you open to aerial attacks, and blocking high will leave you open to lows. The grab is there just as an added layer just in case you get too comfortable. Beating them is easy, and they do a really good job at teaching you the basics. Because of this, they are my favorite enemy type. Sadly, not all predators are created equal. The others aren't quite as clear with what lesson they teach, so I find myself spending a lot of time looking for the answers rather than practicing how to execute them. While teaching the player to find their own solution is great, oftentimes the solution is to exploit AI weakness. By letting the players know what the secret to the fight is, they are more likely to focus on mastering the skill rather than looking for ways to avoid it. For me, the snake is the worst offender of this. When asking the developers, they said that the snake is meant to teach you how to get around zoning and projectiles. That said, the snake AI is so stupid that it lets you run up to it and just whack it. Alternatively, you can let it try to walk away into your lasso range and then just blow it up. Because the snake is supposed to be a zoner, they decided to make it a priority for it to want to retreat to a safe distance. While trying to retreat, it often prioritizes running away over trying to stop you from advancing. Because of this, it completely misses the point of a zoner. A zoner is supposed to control space, not necessarily create space. That said, the other enemy types are serviceable. I like the bears, but they're used far too sparingly, and most of the fights will have you fighting wolves and panthers. While on the topic of snakes, there is a snake boss as well. This fight was pretty awesome. Overall, the enemy design has the right idea. I love what the dev team set out to achieve, though I can't help but feel that the enemy types are way too weak in comparison to their boss counterparts. The boss battles are also severely more difficult, so going from trampling basic enemies to bosses is just jarring. I'm all for difficulty spikes, but every time there's a boss battle, I feel like I just changed the game difficulty to a higher setting. This results in boring fights versus predators, and then translating into barely scraping by in boss fights. I would like to recommend lowering the difficulty spike by buffing basic predators just a little bit to prepare you better for bosses. The bosses themselves are a 3-phase fight, and you don't get to rest in between. Each phase builds upon what the boss did in the last one. There are a few bad phases that I don't think ramp up the difficulty, but rather lower it. The snake boss, for example, has a laughably easy final phase. It's not very fun. I enjoyed phase 1 and 2 better. In phase 3, it acts like a slightly larger version of the snake enemy type. I've already explained why those aren't very hard. The next phase I will mention belongs to a boss version of a playable character. Yes, you heard that right, playable characters are boss battles as well. They're outfitted with brand new story-exclusive attacks. These attacks are not designed for PvP and serve only to make the boss fights engaging and thematic. Velvet's phase 3 isn't very hard. It goes from a fight to an obstacle course as you dodge various projectiles in order to reach her. She hardly puts up a fight, provided that you've learned how to walk forward and duck occasionally. Seriously, this fight needs a buff. Apart from that, Paprika gets a pretty tough one, and Oleander does too. The Oleander fight is extra special because you can technically lose and still progress. I won't give everything away, but just know that the Oleander fight has multiple outcomes. I only wish the outcome mattered more. Perhaps these things will come into play in later chapters. At the moment of writing the script, the only chapter available is Arizona. Next one is supposedly Velvet's, so I have yet to know whether the choices matter or not. There is a scene with Fred at the end of the chapter 1 that makes me think there might be branching paths and alternate endings, so I'm pretty hopeful for the future. Overall, even though the enemy design does fall short in a few areas, I do still think the idea and the execution is commendable. The problems are minor compared to how much good Chapter 1 has going for it so far. With all that said, the last bit of this review is going to be covering some suggestions and pet peeves with the story. Okay, so remember when I said I'd like to access story-specific battles outside of the story? Boom! Suggestion number 1. Make a boss rush mode or a trophy room of sorts where you can interact with statues of enemies and load up a fight versus said enemy. Ideally, it would be awesome if we could make our own obstacle courses composed of the enemies we want in order we want them. Like a survival mode of sorts where your health carries over and you keep grinding the enemies in a playlist of your own choosing. Small predators can go in groups up to 3 like in the story mode, and the bear is always a solo fight, also like the story mode. The cool thing would be carrying the health over when loading up the next match, even if it's a boss fight. I don't know how hard this would be to create from the dev's point of view, but it's kinda my ideal world here. If they can make this happen though, I'd be over the moon. But if not, well, these are suggestions for a reason, aren't they? If I actually expected them to take my word as gospel, then it would be more like demands, right? And I'm not about to take their baby hostage for the sake of a lousy feature or two. The baby refers to the game, for those that didn't get it. Oh, and them's little stone puzzles? Add those outside of the story, please. They are so much fun. Suggestion number 2. Certain character fights seem very avoidable. For the future chapters, and ideally for the current one, I'd like an option to skip a fight. For example, the Paprika fight. Playing this game, it's no secret that they drew some inspiration from Undertale. So when I saw how the Paprika fight was handled, I thought that a big opportunity has been missed. I think the developers don't want to run the risk of the player skipping content they worked hard for, but hear me out. The way you initiate Paprika's fight is by inspecting one of the stone puzzles. Paprika then bursts out of the puzzle and you have to fight her. The thing is that the path away from the puzzle is completely open and uncontested. Normally the stone puzzles actually are the way forward, but this time around, it's just kinda sitting there. If you should choose to ignore the puzzle, then your character, or Arizona in this case, is going to make a remark on how you should check out the puzzle. The thing that made Undertale so damn beloved is the fact that you could skip the content so much. Your tiny little decisions could make you change. Buying the donuts from the spiders meant that the fight with Muffet could be almost entirely skipped. It is a fun fight, and I'm sure Toby worked very hard on it, but the end result was just more memorable and reminded you that your options matter in this world. No matter how big or small those options may be, they do matter. Even changing it to Paprika bursting out of the stone herself if you try to walk away would be a nice little addition. The player would feel like the developer stopped and thought about this outcome and created a special little animation for it. Going a bit further, if you choose to skip her, she might come back to annoy you a bit later at a far worse timing, or her fight could be more punishing. You could really run wild with some of the options and go from the small little flavorful decisions leading into the same consequence, or full-on consequences that have nothing to do with the original outcome. There is another idea I would have liked, but this one's extra silly. If you just skip the fight with Paprika, she would continue to stalk you to the end of the chapter. You don't even need to animate her, just play her sound clips in the Temple of Gloom and add a bit of echo to them, so you kinda have to guess where she is. It's a nice little flavorful decision that would have stayed true to the character while also making sure that there are options to be explored within the world. I think little flavorful decisions like this massively impact on how memorable the game is. I think people would talk about just how much attention to detail was put into the game, and I think they would remember these things very fondly. Now, I think those who played the game will remember it fondly anyways, though I can't help but feel that this little extra touch would elevate it to legendary status. Please consider it if possible. Suggestion number 3. Now, if I'm entirely honest, this suggestion might actually already be in the game. I low-key might have just been unaware of it. This is the last suggestion for now, and it directly ties into one of my peeves. It goes as follows. Cosmetic items allowing you to do things you couldn't before. The idea came to me in the Temple of Gloom when I ran across an ancient scroll. The scroll was written in a language Arizona couldn't read, but it felt too important to just be a prop with no secret tied to it. I came to the idea that perhaps a certain hat or an item might possess some magic that would allow me to read the scroll. Sadly, I had no such item, and I had to leave the scroll where I found it. I just couldn't be bothered to search for more cosmetics without knowing if it would actually make a difference. After all, for all I knew back then, and to be entirely honest, for all I know to this moment, the scroll could come into play with another, more knowledgeable character. So, this kinda leads me into my peeves. Peeve number 1. I already talked about why I'd like them to be avoidable, or at least more reasonable. Velvet just attacks you for no other reason than, "I'm the beautiest!" Well, yes, technically only one champion can win, but that just seems like a plot contrivance given that the herds used to be one big herd that worked together to seal the predators away. The herds are also in relatively civil relations, so I don't see why they would pit their champions up against each other. Wasn't there an agreement demanding that each herd selects a champion? If only one can be champion and every herd still needs to present their most powerful champion to compete, then wouldn't it be a wise idea to just make a tournament to decide who is the actual champion, rather than just sending them all out and having them fight at inopportune moments? For example, what would happen if a bunch of predators showed up at the end of one of the important battles and pretty much just slaughtered both the champions that fought amongst themselves? It seems a little bit not natural or stupid. What's the word for this? It just seems entirely forced, and the players should have an option to try and avoid it if they want to. Alternatively, why not just make them friendly sparring matches where tensions just get way too high for various reasons? For example, Velvet and Arizona spar, but when people see that Velvet's losing, her pride kicks into overdrive. She then goes into stage 3. She lets her pride and emotion take her over, and the sparring match goes from a simple friendly match to a slightly more serious one. I don't know, it's just a peeve I guess. I'm fine with how things are right now, but I can't say it doesn't bother me even a little bit. Peeve number 2. Like I said in suggestion number 3, currently the cosmetics are the only reason to explore, yet the game gives you way more good cosmetics than you would know what to do with. They also have next to no value given that they have absolutely no impact on the story, unless suggestion number 3 is actually a thing and I'm not aware of it, like I said. Taking the time out of my day to explore side paths involves a lot of backtracking and convoluted paths for no reward. I would much prefer it if venturing off the beaten path would give me a little Easter egg over cosmetics. I'll do another callback to Undertale as an example. Before heading into Snowden Town, there's a pathway leading upwards and a sign saying there's nothing but ice and snow in all directions apart from Snowden. If you should go up, however, not only is there no convoluted path with puzzles and long walks through many empty areas, but the reward is a nice little bit of world building. You find a fishing rod with nobody there. If you pull it up, you can see a picture of a monster attached to the line with a number. It's a silly little thing that doesn't reward you with anything material, but it does make you feel that the characters are living their own lives and have their own worries when the main character is not looking. The monster has no idea that the human has fallen down and has nothing to do with you. But it's still there and it makes the world feel more alive. Exploring the world of Phonem often feels like exploring a big, barren, and mostly lifeless area. The areas are populated, however, they are populated with mostly throwaway NPCs reacting to you rather than directly interacting with you. There is no illusion of a living world outside your view. For the future episodes, I'd like to discover quirky things happening off the main path that provide insight into the world these characters inhabit. Either that or give the collectibles more value. It's your choice. Peeve number 3. The pixel map layout feels more expansive than it can afford to be. Areas are large and have many other areas serving as nothing more than a pathway from point A to point B, yet the road in between is simply empty and uninteresting. The game could benefit from streamlining the amount of travel between impactful areas. Strangely enough, the only area I found fun to explore was the Temple of Gloom, since it felt like the rooms were very connected in an interesting way and I felt like it was just one big puzzle. It was very fun. Having many paths I have no reason to go down or am poorly rewarded for exploring has only made me dread the idea of exploring. Big areas are great, but you also have to populate them with something very interesting. It's like a double-edged sword of open world games. Sure, you can brag about how big your world is, but it doesn't mean anything if it's not entertaining to explore. Anybody can make a large empty desert area, but is it going to be fun to explore? Probably not. It's realistic, but we don't necessarily always want realism in our games. Sometimes less is more. If you find yourself unable to think of cool things to put on the side paths, maybe don't develop a side path there. The last one is a very personal one, as I don't particularly like exploring unless I get more story or cool new locations. Or desirable power-ups, or pretty much anything worth my while. Getting currency or cosmetics just isn't cutting the butter for me. But maybe that's just me. Maybe this is very fun for others. I still had to include it in here because it is a personal review, and as such I have to include my personal gripes. TLDR, the game is a masterpiece. It's brimming with innovation and personality. While there isn't too much content, the content that is available is made with passion, and more importantly, it's the right content. Everything is enjoyable, and I can wholeheartedly recommend this game to anybody, no matter who you are or what you prefer to play. I honestly believe there is a certain charm achieved that will rope anybody in, no matter who they are. A beautiful blend of iconic visuals, fantastic music, and innovative gameplay that is sure to appeal to a certain side of everybody. The reason I'm focusing on the negatives so much is because, well, it's what I do. I'm only this hard on things I actually enjoy. I want to see them grow and thrive, so I nitpick in hopes that they will continue to grow. If the game never got updated again, I would still be happy with what I've gotten so far. It's worth every penny, there is no denying that. That said, I think I speak for more than just myself when I say I'd much prefer to see updates and improvements. This game is a gem, but it's still a bit rough around the edges. Minor tweaks can make it truly shine. My final rating for Thems Fightin Herds is a very, very strong 9 out of 10. I would give it a 10 out of 10, but like I said, there's still a few things that could be improved. Now, is that a bad rating or anything? Like, should I give it a 10 out of 10 because it is an indie title or whatever? No, I have to give it room to improve, especially because I see places where it could improve. More characters, more story, fixing some of the issues I have with the story. You know, there is room to improve, and I think that the game is very close to achieving that. That said, 9 out of 10 is amazing. What Main 6 achieved here is nothing short of inspirational. It's absolutely amazing, and I want to support it in any way I can. Finally, I want to let you know that I'll be linking some resources to get you started with the game in the description down below. There's also a link on a short documentary film on how Main 6 came to be and all the struggles of making the game that would eventually become Thems Fightin Herds. My name is definitely not Alex. I hope you guys enjoy this. I hope you go and support the game. And I'll see you in the next one. Toodaloo.